What's going on, Neon Nation? Welcome back to the Neon Arcade for some more Cyberpunk 2077 lore. Today we're going over the history of Cyberpunk 2077 from Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red to get you up to speed on the state of the world, the US, and of course Night City in just about 5 minutes. The origins of the Cyberpunk world started with the 1994 crash of the world stock market as a result of European and American stock manipulation by the Gang of Four. This led to the collapse of the United States in 1996, which was a definitive catalyst plunging the world into a high-tech and low life. During the years of the collapse, life was pretty rough in the States. The homelessness on the street in America had skyrocketed to 21 million, with the technological revolution splitting the classes into the wealthy elite and corporate professionals and the poor unskilled blue-collar workers. The middle class was all but eradicated during this time, setting the foundation for more despair in the 2000s. Business sectors in outer suburbs and large cities were the benefactors of increased standards and were clean, free of crime and poverty, and controlled and populated by powerful corporations whose emergence was accelerated by the prior years. The central areas were surrounded by ghettos and combat zones filled with growing booster gangs and violent factions. In the Midwestern states, small towns were abandoned due to drought, famine, and economic chaos. Farms were bought out by agri-corporations who took control of the means of production. Freeways inevitably became the battlegrounds for gangs that would travel from city to city to loot anything they could. Megacities, which replaced some small towns and suburbs annihilated in the collapse, became the focal points of society, and fervent capitalism helped create a landscape where the megacorporations ruled with nation-like authority. They shaped almost everything around them and bolstered their interests with armies in their search for utter domination. With the overall prevalence of technology, the only leveler between the street and the skyscrapers was this technology. Cyberware, weapons, and resourcefulness was utilized by edgerunners, cyberpunks, and rebels to stand against these megacorporations. This was effectively the state of the world before the next radical shift, the Fourth Corporate War in 2021. While there had been wars between corporations before, nothing quite compared to the mass-scale devastation of the Fourth Corporate War. An initial confrontation between two agri-corps specializing in underwater shipping and tech devolved into a conflict between Militech, an armaments and security force, and Arasaka, a security services megacorp out of Japan, as they were brought on to aid in the initial conflict. Both combatants had military scale equivalent to small nations and moved from pockets of conflict between them to all over the nation to space and cyber attacks, spurring an effective Third World War. On August 20th, 2023, unknown forces detonated a pocket nuke on the upper floors of the Arasaka Towers complex in Night City, reducing the central city to rubble and killing thousands of people. While there were sides who blamed either Arasaka or Militech, this was the final straw as President Elizabeth Kress nationalized Militech and banished Arasaka with the threats of striking their Tokyo headquarters. Other nations swiftly followed the US's lead. The war was over, and for Night City led to the time of the Red. Named aptly for the red hue left in the Night City skies post-fallout from the debris and toxic smog, this was a period of time in the US and Night City's history which was categorized by an effort to rebuild. The US had lost so much of its world superpower status, but Europe and the Far East hadn't fared much better. The military that still existed for the US was a Combined Operations Group, or COG force, an indication of how emaciated their forces were. President Kress was the only thing holding Night City together, the hardest place hit by the war. 20 years later, there's still damage everywhere. Post-war Night City is a wreck, but they're determined to rebuild. An alliance known as the Pacific Confederation has allowed Night City to survive as an independent city-state. Night City has become an entry point for the rest of the world who doesn't want to deal with the US as a free trade zone. It's dangerous, nearly lawless, and a great place to get a big score. Beyond the borders of the US, the Euro theater has been badly battered by this war. Economically, however, Europe is still in decent standing. International corporations still have a strong sense of power, although Euro governments have been able to keep the Euro business barons under control. The Middle East has been largely left alone. With the oil and raw materials trade disrupted by corporate conflict, all there's left to do is to mine the remains of these nations, although this is met with resistance in the form of Middle Eastern national groups. Once a fractured continent, the new Africa was developed due to establishing themselves in space, with nearly 1/3 of space workers being African and a majority of spaceport facilities being on African soil. The population in space has evolved into a group known as the High Riders, a high-tech orbital society with Pan-African roots. It's safe to say Africa has avoided much of the world damage. Asia after the Fourth Corporate War is a scattered area of damaged nations, with standout Japan slowly recovering. Central America sits as a strong union of independent states. The Fourth Corporate War ended Corpo domination and wounded their infrastructure in a multitude of ways, from their net presence to their global transportation means. The corporates, however, are far from out of the picture. They aren't so mega anymore, but they are still powerful on a regional and even national scale, even without the enormous international reach of the 2020s. This has made the corporations even more ruthless in their desire to rise back to power, and they're willing to do anything to do so. In this post-war environment, the cyberpunks and edgerunners have bridged the power gap. This is where Night City in the world stands in the 2040s, where everyone has the potential to be a player. Welcome to the world of Cyberpunk. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. For more Cyberpunk lore, join Neon Nation by subscribing to the Neon Arcade.